Let's do it.
Okay. We are live on Oz Property Investor. We bring the big names and we have the big no Joe fun today. How you going, Palise? What's happening, man?
I heard Joe's got the sniffles, doesn't he?
Yeah, he said he put. Oh wow, a lot of people watching. It's going to be a big session this time. Joe, people have tuned in. Joe's bought his minions, but no, it's going to be big because we're going to talk about why buying commercial is wrong. Because I think that's a critical thing that with interest rates going down, this is one of those sessions you need to really watch. We're going to talk about, first off, some of those things that Palise is seeing in the market that I found super interesting. And there's going to be some spreadsheets and a Q&A as well. He's going to reveal, I'm going to ask him his worst commercial investment. I didn't ask you about that before, so I hope I'm putting him on the spot. So stay tuned. You have about 45 minutes. So if you don't want to just, anyway, we're going to talk about it. But Steve, for those people who haven't seen you, you are the head of Palise Property, drawing on that mathematical, analytical. Anyway, you've done 2,000 property commercial transactions, and you've been in the industry over 10 years now, is it? Probably even 13 or 14.
Yeah, I did a podcast yesterday, and I was kind of telling them about my passive income on that, and then they're just like, wait, how long have you been doing this for? And I was like, I did the calculation. I was like, oh, yeah, 12, 13 years. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme, is it?
No, it's not. But no. You are, I suppose, one of the preeminent commercial buyers agents in Australia. So thanks for coming on as always. And we're going to make this interactive. So drop your Q&A questions and let us know. And the reason why I'm excited for this session is because very few people will talk down their asset class. Like some people will sort of do it, but you will actually, and I'll sort of hold your feet to the fire to sort of do as much of that as I can. So without further ado, I want to get into one of those big things that sort of upcoming in the market, and that is lease stock loans. So what is happening in that space? And then we'll go to what interest rates going down is likely to do for commercial property.
Straight into it, Jeff. No small talk. No, how's my holiday in Vietnam? Nothing. We're straight into it.
I can. Okay, well, we'll get to that. I want to get the audience all humming. But no, okay. How was your audience? How was your trip to Vietnam? What are you doing these days, man? Like, do you even work?
No, I still work. I'm very structured with my work day. So it's 4 days, 10 till 4 maximum. This is pretty much the only thing I do outside of hours, which I do on a side note, I commented about Denver and that beard. Someone on YouTube was like, get rid of that beard. It's ridiculous even if it is real.
Don't do it. Please don't. I've seen, and Jeff teased you.
I don't have a strong jawline. So it's definitely, my partner says it's called beard fishing. So I've trapped her in with my weak beard. A couple of weeks in Vietnam. I still, like I said, do 10 to 4. When I'm on holidays, I relax a bit more. Going to the UK and Europe, working from there for all of June and July. So I try to get 4 months kind of overseas travel, which you before the session was like, how is that possible kind of thing? So we can talk about that. But I absolutely love travel. I won't stop doing it. The only thing that's probably going to put a handbrake on that is kids going to school and that stuff. Even on a side note, I'm not that thrilled about them going to school. I think primary school is important. I think high school's completely useless, but we're going to have that chat another time, I suppose.
No, interesting. Well, I could talk about home. I could talk about homeschooling, but no, let's not do that. So, yeah, that's great, man. I love that you're able to. Yeah, I could just have a whole session about travel, but let's not do that. So, but if you have questions of Steve, you want to ask those hard-hitting questions, I'm not afraid to ask them. So drop them in. I want to know. But Steve, talk to us about what's going on in commercial lending with ANZ, and that seems exciting to me. Lease stock, because typically lease stock is 60%, but what are they doing that's a little bit special, and how can it help your average property investor?
Yeah. So firstly, lease stock's never typically anything. It is based on what the rent covers the portion of the mortgage, plus, like you mentioned, like interest called ICR, the interest coverage ratio, and that's normally at 1.5. So basically, if you're getting a lease stock loan, the borrowing capacity is different based on the yield that you get. So you might actually have a 60% for a 6.5% net yield, a 55% for a 5.5%, and a 50% for, say, a 4.5% net, because it's got to basically wash its own face. That's obviously, they're a bit harder, and the LVRs are quite lower because interest rates have been so high the last couple of years. 5 years ago when I started, if you had the 30% deposit, happy days, get into it, keep buying kind of thing. A couple things have changed. So there's a couple lenders, one of them's ANZ, like you mentioned, has dropped that ICR rating. So most of them do it at 1.5. So basically they're looking at, you can cover 50% more. That's actually dropped now to 1.25, and interest rates have come down. So all of a sudden now things are quite lucrative. I've actually got a lease doc calculator spreadsheet if you want to pull that up now.
Do you want to see this now or later, team? Because I want to get to some of the juicy stuff, because the things he's sharing now are taking away from why we shouldn't be buying commercial. I want to. Yeah, but no. Okay,
Well,
let's have a quick.
This is one of the biggest negatives. So one of the biggest
Okay.
negatives is the deposit that you need. So like if you're out of servicing with residential,
that was my main point.
Yeah, if you had a service residential, commercial is great because you can keep borrowing, but you need a big chunk of cash. Like even when you get, so at the moment, ANZ's 70% loan to value ratio on a lease stock, but you need 6% net for it to make sense. So a net yield 6%, which you can do in this market. So it's still possible, but 30% plus 3.4, 3.5% stamp duty, plus some, the loan costs are actually sometimes a percentage as well. So like 0.5%. So there's the money there. Then there's valuation, then there's solicitor fees, and there's building and pest, loan establishment fees. Like we're talking sometimes 350 grand. Like
I'm never buying commercial, Steve.
Yeah,
I can't do it on $1 million property.
That's a lot of money. 350 grand to buy $1 million is a lot compared to resi, where you can get away with it for 100 grand typically. So that's the main one. But let me just pull up the spreadsheet.
What while you're pulling up the spreadsheet, and I'll bring it, and maybe it's hard for you to, I want to know, what are some of the reasons? Because I did ask this question, why we shouldn't be buying property. And somebody was like, it's all a scam, it's all a Ponzi. And that is typically the reason, whether we're talking resi or commercial. What are the reasons you see that we shouldn't be buying property at all? Like, what do you think are some of those reasons? Because I think that's important to, What do you see?
I actually did a YouTube video on why I think it's actually a Ponzi scheme. And it is, but the whole financial system is a make-believe system. Like you shouldn't be able to, like, some politician say something and the prices of things actually change, because that shows that it's not a real thing. It's all what an expectation of what something's value is. So property is the exact same. It's what we could value an asset at. It's not a real tangible value. Otherwise, it wouldn't go up and go down. So it's more got to do with, like, basically the government's always going to prop it up. Like they're not going to see it crash. They make too much money. I had a funny chat with a client the other day, and I worked out we paid literally just my business alone. It was something like $2 million just worth of stamp duties, and then taxes for staff, etc. is like another $1 million. Like just a small little buyer's agent like me is giving the government $3 million. Like I can only imagine you times that by 1,000 buyer's agent, then every mum and dad investor, then every business, like everything is basically revolved around making the government money. But I don't want to get into that. I ignore all that stuff. I always just got the mindset of, if you buy something of value that someone's going to need in the future, no matter what the value is, you're still up on not owning anything at all. And like the one I'll actually use is, like, say you own these 5 residential properties and the prices go to zero in the future, but they still need to pay for rent. I can still rent somewhere 5 times as nice as those properties because I've got 5 rents coming in, assuming I'm debt free and haven't lost money, kind of thing. And that's my mindset long term with it. I don't really care, and we can run all the numbers about it, like potentially, it's going to triple in value, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but so the cost of goods and services might triple as well. So like it's all relative. Mine's just making sure I'm ahead of the next guy. That sounds really arrogant.
No, but the interesting thing when you talk about it, when you say that, if properties were literally to go down, I don't think you'd be getting rent anyway. I think there'd be significant problems in the economy. We'd probably be going back to living caves. So, but it's just interesting. Some of the reasons why, I mean, yes, I think you could argue that there's bubble and there's inflation in any property, whether it be commercial or resi, mostly resi to some extent, because it's probably easier to speculate. I mean, maybe disagree with that on that. But I think some of the reasons are, if you're sort of trying to sort of time that sort of market, or if you're going to do something significant in your life in the next 2 years, and if you're just going to sort of buy that property and then sort of sell it in that time, to me, you shouldn't be buying property in that situation, in most situations. Yes, as you say, case by case. So that's the kind of reasons why I think people should be wary of buying.
Let's touch on the recession comment, because I've had that chat probably 3-4 times a day for the last few weeks, especially with all the Trump nonsense going on as well. People always go, I'm not going to buy commercial because of the recession coming. But if the commercials aren't filled, guess where people work? Like every single person has a job, works in a commercial property, and like, yes, there's a small percentage that work from home, but effectively, if there's a recession, no more warehouses, no more retail, no more office, how the hell are they going to pay the rent? So like, if commercial stuff, the resi market stuffed as well. So don't say commercial is going to implode. Say the whole market's going to implode, which it might. I'm not arguing that, but you kind of get what I mean. Like the people living in the houses need commercial.
Yeah, this has gotten a little bit spicy than what I thought, Steve. I can see a little bit of a furrow of your brow. Like now he's got a smile, so he's relaxing a little bit. But no, I enjoy that sort of healthy. If Joe was here, he'd be sort of he'd be going heather and tong now. He could see a bit of weakness there, maybe not. But we'll talk about some of those more reasons as well, people. So throw your questions in if you have any concerns or ideas about. I'm loving. There's so much interaction. We've already got 30 people YouTube. We've got all that. So drop the likes, all that stuff. I want to know, Steve, if interest rates go down, which they most likely will, is that going to see more people sort of start to pile into commercial property because the yield, the risk, and then eventually prices will probably go up quicker than rents potentially? Is that what will likely happen in commercial property?
So yeah, there's a bit more to it than that. So commercials are generally valued on the yield, i.e. the cap rate. Yes, if the interest rates come down, that increases your cash flow on the property, which means it's more lucrative, hence why it probably go up. So, and that will either mean it stays at the same cap rate and it will actually it means if rents, if the repayments are the same and you get more cash flow and more people buy, the prices will go up and the cap rate will come down.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is it'll drop from 6% to say 5.5%. So anyone trying to enter the market after that has to pay a premium for it. However, there's a point I want to touch on. I had someone tell me that for residential market, when interest rates come down, the resi market's going to grow. And then I always facetiously respond with that with, what happened when interest rates were actually going up? And they're like, the market grew. I'm like, so you're now saying the market grows when interest rates go up, the market grows when interest rate goes down. Like which one is it? And then they kind of go, okay, there's more to it than that. And the same thing happens commercial. Like you said, the economy, what the rental increase is actually a big play as well, because that actually shows demand. Yeah. So yes, you can interest the cash flow, but if you got rental increases, that actually gives me more safety than interest rates coming down.
Yeah. Thanks. And we probably need, I'm sure you've got some economics in you and economics in your body, but you are an engineer at heart. So, but let's get on to the reasons why you shouldn't be buying commercial. Then we get to some of the spreadsheets, and I want to sort of understand how people can achieve financial freedom as well. So maybe that's too much I'm putting on our plate, but that's okay because only two of us. So first things first, around why you shouldn't be buying commercial for me is you did touch on it, the large upfront costs. So what do you sort of, and that's where my point about, I think the point I was trying to get across, that commercial doesn't grow as much as resi, and we can argue about that. I think you probably might.
No need to argue, Jeff. I'm right, you're wrong. It grows the same.
I think maybe my point, maybe a better point perhaps, is that it's easier to grow a residential property faster. Because you only need that sort of 5 or 10. No,
no, you're right. You're right. There's more leverage in residential. So
which leverage cuts both ways, of course.
Yeah, like for like commercial, you get same capital growth, better return on cash flow. But you're right. The biggest negative with commercial is the big deposit. Like you're going to get maximum 80% LVR, no 90%, no 100%, no bank guarantees of mum and dad. So on a full doc loan, 80%. If you don't have the servicing,
what assets are you getting 80% on commercial? Can you get a warehouse, or is it purely like really blue chip?
As long as it's not like red flag. It's the same as residential. It's a full doc loan. So they basically look at the rent that the property is receiving, apply their shading criteria, which is like an extra 1.5 to 3.5%. They take 20% vacancy of the property. They do principal and interest, even if you want an interest only loan, and make sure you can afford that. Typically, if you're starting out, like for like, getting a commercial that rents for 3 times as much is going to give you a better borrowing capacity. But you've touched on the biggest negative and why most people shouldn't be buying commercial is you're not leveraging your money. Like the whole premise, you can get way better returns investing in stocks, like way better returns.
Here we go.
But you can't leverage as high. So you can't go with a 5% deposit and get a 95% loan and leverage your money 20 times. So all of a sudden, if I get 5% in property and I can get 10% in stock, I still get a better ROI with property. Not to sugarcoat it, you get it wrong, you also lose that leverage money. And we've seen that you've done sessions on this with off the plans, high density apartments, mining towns. Like there's people that bought for 500K and now they're worth 300K. You leverage your losses as well. Whereas with stocks and shares, you just go to zero. So
as the company would have to.
Yeah. But to answer your question, like you can't get them 20%. The harder thing is it's really hard to buy a quality asset in the sub 500K mark. Whereas residential, you can still buy in a capital city. You can still go buy in Brisbane and buy a townhouse for sub 500K and a good suburb with tight vacancy rates, good rental growth and all that type of stuff. So there's way less chance to stuff it in residential when you're leveraging your money further. But as an asset class, I don't like property. I just like the banks will lend me big dollars. And that's why I got into the game, because it means I can make money faster. Property is what does that. If you're not doing it because of commercial and leaving money on the table of resi, you're doing it wrong. Like the game at the start and accumulation is literally to leverage as much as you can.
Yeah. You've impressed Gurav about, because he's a bit of a shares advocate sometimes, although he's built that big portfolio himself. He says that's not true. You can leverage shares with many ways. Steve was saying as much. Yeah.
I was going to say, I've had that argument with me 1,000 times. Yes, you can, but you cannot get 100% leverage on it. People don't even realize, like, you can literally go get 100% leverage. You can go bank a mum and dad, and they can spot you. Your
105%, Steve. 105%. Because you can
I started my portfolio with 90%, 100%, 105%. So I bought 3 properties with literally 10% deposit.
Yeah. I wanted to know. So there was a question that popped up. So Greg's asked, how about low doc, Steve? What did you want to know in particular about low doc, Greg? Because that's something you could ask many questions about that. But Marcy's asked, what do you think about commercials being slightly negative, or does it need to be positive from day one? How do you think about that?
2 questions. First one, low docs. They were when I first started the commercial thing about, 7 years ago? They were a bit more popular for like business owners and stuff that just wanted to get a deal done. It was the same premise as kind of a lease doc in a way. However, less bank documents you had to give. You pay a higher interest rate for the risk, for instance. I haven't really seen anyone for a low doc for 2 years. It's pretty much full doc, lease doc, or self-managed super fund lending. I might be wrong, but for the clients that I'm getting, they're typically going like a lease doc. So I think that was a bit of a thing of the past. It might change. I might be wrong. If interest rates come down to 3%, low doc might become a thing again where someone's happy to pay 6%.
Yeah, because it's harder for it to make sense if you're paying that sort of 7 or 8% or whatever on a riskier sort of thing.
Yeah, and the next question, really good one. I actually have this discussion with every time we present a property. So every time we present a commercial, because interest rates the way they are, like let's say we buy a bulletproof one at 5.5% net yield. We can get 6.5 still in capital cities, but let's just kind of devil's advocate. 5.5% net yield. And you're paying a 6.5 to 7% interest rate. You can get lease stock 6.5. That's what I got for my shopping center. There's even some popping up 6.3%. So it's kind of around there. At a 70% loan, it's fairly neutral, which a lot of investors kind of get put off. They're like, I thought I was supposed to be instant passive income from this property.
Commercial's a dream. I can give my boss the bird and run outside the office and do all these crazy things. But no, you can't do that, can you?
And hindsight's always a bitch, pardon my French, because I remember 5 years ago, we were buying stuff at 7 to 9% yields and interest rates were down at the 4%. And the properties were 30 grand, 40 grand positive from day dot. And I still had people saying no to me, saying it's too high risk. Well, like there's always a reason not to buy. However, I want to pose two options. The people that go, look, I'm not getting instant cash flow at the moment. Go spend that exact same money on a residential. One's going to be neutral. The other one's going to be negative 50 grand a year. Like, which one's harder to hold? The thing that changes, and we can show some spreadsheets on this, just with a few rental increases, it turns positive very quickly. Like you have 3 to 5
commercial.
With commercial, all of a sudden within 5 years, now you start making bank. You start making your $20,000, $30,000. And we've actually seen more than that in the past. When we're buying 2 years ago and interest rates were still higher, we'd buy that with rental, and because we knew we're buying in demand properties, they're now literally the rents have gone up 30%. And now all of a sudden, when they were kind of complaining, going, oh, it's neutral at the moment, they're now 20, 30 grand positive. And they've also equivalent made 20, 30% capital growth as well.
Can I introduce though one of my key fighting points, and you'll probably have something to say about this, maybe a little bit. I think I know your comeback for this is because you said if rents sort of go up 30%, you're not getting rent if it's vacant. And that was one of my biggest kind of posts, and it got people a little bit rolled up because they're like, this post is not, there's no context to this post. Like I would expect better from somebody moderating the forum. I'm like, well, why do I need to have?
I've actually learned on social media, you will never win. Like I can do like a 30-second clip and someone's like, you forgot depreciation, this, and this. And I'm like, it's a 30-second clip. Like, relax.
It ends up
like,
on EXO. I see the property bears. They get very excited when they see they found a chink in the property person's armory. But so back to my thing about if it's vacant, and I know your objection is going to be, but residential can go vacant too. But how long does residential go vacant for, Steve? So tell us about do you see that as a reason why people shouldn't buy commercial?
Well, how long does a residential go vacant, Jeff?
I mean, in my experience, I've seen typically, I'd say about a month, every a month a year, roughly. That's what I'm sort of thinking. I factor in a month. For
Kalgoorlie?
Well, I mean, I haven't bought a property. I haven't ever bought a property in Kalgoorlie. Do you own one in Kalgoorlie?
Alice Springs, Mount Isa. Okay. Where are we talking, Jeff?
Well, I mean, if you're buying properties in those locations, I wouldn't be buying properties in those locations anyway, Steve. So, are we comparing apples with oranges here?
So the vacancy that you just said a number for only exists in Jeff's mind of well-equipped suburbs that are investment grade.
Yeah. Well,
there's my answer.
But if you compare a commercial in the same, I mean, I don't know. I like to make sure.
I'll be serious for a second. So the biggest negative with commercial is vacancy. If you don't know what you're doing, like that is a huge risk. And certain asset classes have way bigger vacancy. You go buy an office suite in a kind of residential area with like high vacancies. Even the city's got like 17% in most capital cities at the moment. That's the risk. And it'll feel like a lot more when you're in the thick of it as well, because even a well kind of positioned commercial, let's say an industrial, vacancy rates are 1 to 3 months. Let's say it goes vacant at an awkward time of year, November, and all of a sudden that drags out to 6 months. 6 months of zero rent is really hard for a mum and dad client to stomach. However, let me like propose it this way though. If you buy a tenanted one, all right, so we've already established typically that you get 3 times more rent for a commercial than you do a residential property. If I go out and buy a 3-year lease, so let's just say I buy an industrial in Brisbane and the vacancy rates are sub 6 months, but let's just ignore that for now. And it's got a 3-year lease, a good bank guarantee, a good cash bond, and the lease is secured. So I know I'm going to get 3 years worth of rent. If it goes vacant, it can sit there vacant for another 6 years before I'm in a worse position than the residential. 6 years, like 1-6. Like, so the argument I'm going to make is yes, it's way more risky if you don't know it, and if you don't know how to prepare your buffers.
Damn it! That was another one. That was another one of our points why you shouldn't buy commercial. It's like it's like you read the document I prepared, but I don't think you have. So,
I haven't.
But Greg's on Team Jeffy. He said old Commonwealth Bank around the corner from my place has been vacant for over a year, and Greg doesn't live in Kalgoorlie, so I know he may have owned a property or two in Kalgoorlie, but he lives in a beautiful part of Tea Tree Gully I shouldn't say where he lives. Actually, he doesn't live there. So yeah, he's in a metro location. So are we sort of talking the business risk there? Is that sort of why somebody doesn't know what they're doing?
No, that one. So it's actually a really good point. So, and this is why I said like you got to know what you're doing, and this is a hard thing with commercial because they can vary so much. The problem with a lot of those banks are they're effectively office ones. So a lot of times they're like a big corner block on an intersection. So they only really double up as like a real estate agency or a bank. We weren't touching. We've pretty much never touched a bank. We bought one in the last 5 years, just because our development potential. like how many people walk into banks now? Like the thing is, and then this is where a lot of first-time investors get blindsided. They'll actually get a good yield on a bank. Like you can go buy in Sydney and get a bank at a 6% net, and people are like, "Oh, brilliant! I'm getting a bank 6%." What they don't realize is they're probably going to leave at the end of it, and you're going to have that period of vacancy for a year. However, you can take that into account.
Don't they typically have long leases though?
They do, and that's how they kind of get you in. So they're already on like a 3-year lease, or there's a 5-year lease, and there's 2 or 3 years to go on it, kind of thing. And then it looks pretty good. You go 6-7% net yield. Bank tenant is definitely going to pay it out, et cetera, et cetera. And then they go vacant, and it's fairly one-dimensional. I'm not against banks that are maybe in like a suburban retail strip, because if they leave, you can actually fill them quite quickly, because it can be a hairdresser or a medical center or a whatever tattoo parlor. Like it's got versatility to it. The problem with a lot of those, I imagine the one he's talking about is that standalone kind of bank on the corner that's purpose built.
He said spot on, approximately 300 square meters. So maybe there could be some negotiation power there if we could go in. I mean, I don't know if it quite works that way, because they're just going to say, well, we don't need to sell because it's, for whatever reason, they're still paying some sort of, I mean, there's no rent, I suppose. So maybe it's a risk. You can't get a lease doc on a vacant property, can you? Because there's no lease in place.
Exactly.
So you need to go full doc.
Yeah, but again, it's case by case. Like a bank in a shopping, a bank in a like a Westfields, completely different to suburban bank, completely different to a standalone freestanding one. The freestanding one's got some cool value add though. Like if you get it and you're like, oh cool, I've got the plan that if they do leave in 3, 4, 5 years time, and there is going to be potentially a year vacancy, do something else with it. Like cool, like try to tee someone up. Like if it's the end of the lease term and they don't have options, start talking 3, 4 years earlier. You got 4 years to find a tenant. And then when they leave, you can purpose build something again. Get it, a childcare, whatever it may be. You know what I mean? So, but again, I'm agreeing with your point. If you don't know what you're doing, it's much easier to burn yourself. But I think people forget how easily people burn themselves in residential as well. Like we all know someone who's bought an off the plan and the valuation didn't come in, or someone who's done an NDIS property and they're like, oh, it's great. I get a great return. I only have to chip in an extra 200 grand because the valuation came in short. But that's 200 grand that you can put something else.
Or they bought in a flood zone and then gone unconditional without considering insurance. And then all of a sudden you're not uninsurable probably, but you're paying that sort of 5 to 6 to 7 or 8K on insurance. And you just sort of say, and then crap, when it does actually flood, like what happens then? Like it's a ticking time bomb potentially. So I think we sometimes get clouded, Jeff, because we've been doing this for a long time and we've had these chats about what a bad property is. So we sort of automatically don't think of it. But I remember when I started out, like most clients come to me, I couldn't believe some of the stuff they were buying. Like they'd go pay $900,000 for a penthouse 1 bedroom in Perth. And you're just kind of like, why did you do that? But again, you don't know what you don't know. The same as I've bought a couple little duds in my portfolio as well. Did you know that I thought that you go on holiday and you go to that place, you go to Surf's Paradise when you're a sort of young 20-year-old and you think, I could buy a property in one of these high rises because it'd be fun to own a property in Surf's Paradise and just go there once or twice a year. You just think, but and then I actually used to look and sort of see what the price they were going for and how many they were selling. And I just thought, even though I didn't know what I know now, I thought that's probably not a great idea because these properties are taking a while to sell and there's a lot of them. So supply and demand. There's been some great questions. The common one I get is people buy Airbnb properties and like, oh, it's great. I've seen like in summer rents for $2.5 grand a week, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, what's the rent for a winter? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And you're like, well, what is it? And then they go talk to a property management company and they say, oh yeah, we've got an 80% occupancy rate on this property. What you then need to check is, well, that is actually really good in theory, but what you actually need to check is what they're actually renting them for. And then you actually go through and they actually have basically halve the price in winter. Like sometimes it's literally less than the weekly rent for a normal rental. So you got to prepare yourself that way. It's like there's always ways you can burn yourself. The hard thing with commercial is people just look at the high level numbers and go, oh, this looks fantastic. Look at the cash on cash return. And that draws them in. Yeah, man. So we have something special to give away with Steve. So I'm going to pick a couple of people from the comments, and if you're watching a replay, also drop us a comment on that as well, because I have 2 things to give away for 2 people watching live and 1 person for watching replay. So if you watch this in 6 months' time, you might not get it. But it's going to be a special surprise with Steve. I think he knows about this. I hope somebody told him.
Just the back rubs I gave you, Jeff?
Yeah. Come down. Maybe. But I want to know, what is the reason why you want to be financially free? Like, is it to travel like Steve? Is it to just buy a Ferrari? Is it a Lambo? Is it Lambo or is it holiday? Or what do you want to do with that financial freedom? So I'm pumping the algo a little bit, so excuse me. But I want to know, he said, so Guru's asked, how easy or difficult is it to release equity from commercial property, I imagine? Is it easy?
Really good question. I'll answer it sort of in two parts. So first part, if you've bought one on, say, a full doc loan, i.e. no different to a residential, they've done anything, you've got the loan, typically they're a bit shorter, they're 15 to 25 years, can still get 30 years, but most people get a 15 to 25 year lease. Exact same situation, you go to the bank, you get a valuation, you pull out the equity. The annoying part is you have to pay for that valuation. They don't just do a desktop check like they do residential and go, oh, yeah, cool, your property is now worth $650. You're up for $1,500 doing that.
The valuation.
So you need to be pretty damn sure that the valuation is going to come in strong. Different valuers go wildly different as well. We had one yesterday. Valuation came in short. We were like, this valuer is an absolute idiot. We had literally like 10 comparables showing that we're well priced with it. We went back to a different valuer a week later, happy days, came in on point, we're moving forward with it. So, but then in that situation, they're up for two valuations. So there's $3,000 there. So that's the answer to the question. Exact same. Go get it valued. Go pull out the equity based on the same LVR. Again, LVR is lower, so you're actually getting a smaller piece of that pie because you still need to keep that LVR. So you're only getting that smaller portion out because it's like if your property grows $100,000, you got an 80% LVR, you can't pull out $100,000. You pull out 80%. When it's 70% or 65%, then it's only 65 or 70 grand. So that's the first part. The second one is with the lease stock. You typically don't do it unless you've got a long lease. So if you've got something on a 3-year lease, it's unlikely you're going to get a year and a half and try to go back and refinance on another lease stock to get a high value, to get a 1.5-year lease. Most of the time you'll wait until the end. Tenant will re-sign. They're going to do another valuation anyway. And then you go from there. Again, external to that, if you've got a property that maybe on like a 5 or 7 year lease and you bought it 5 or 7 years ago, you might get itchy feet and you might do it now because you're like, I know there's 30-40% there. Let's do it, get the money out and buy another commercial of the exact same value.
That's crazy, man. That not crazy, but that people would consider getting equity out on a lease stock loan because wouldn't that I would consider that almost be quite risky because what happens if the tenant does vacate and then the value of the prop? Because with a lot of those lease stocks, I imagine they do yearly reviews. A lot of lenders, wouldn't they? So what happens if it goes vacant? They do their review, and can you get into a lot of strife?
Not all of them. Some of them do. My personal properties I go on a lease stock. I make sure I get the ones that don't do the yearly review just because don't want to deal with the headache. But that's an arrogant position. You still do it. So I actually still see it a fair bit in the last 5 years because if you bought something, let's say 5 years ago on a 5-year lease, a couple years ago, it's already up 30%. So yes, theoretically, you could wait the 2 years and then do it now. But if there's $400,000 sitting there right now, why not change it to get another 2-year lease stock, pull out that $400,000 and then buy another 1.2 mil property. And then you got two going 2 years earlier than you would have in the go. But again, most people aren't buying 7-10-year leases. They're buying 3, maximum 5.
Yeah. I maybe I'm a little bit more conservative than you, Steve. Maybe we've discovered that Steve is living large. Like he's driving around that racetrack in his, I don't know what that thing, the post I put up about taking a scooter to a racetrack. Yeah, that was silly, that post. But the other reason, so we're going to get back to the reason. Why commercial is, so we've spoken about its larger upfront costs that can limit your portfolio growth because you can't leverage as much. You try to argue with that. It's folks, I think one that we have sort of unpacked, and for this is a question I'd like to ask about buyer's agents as well, when you're using a commercial buyer's agent, but it's if you're going and doing your own due diligence and you're not a fan of due diligence, commercial is probably not for you. Or if you're afraid to hire an expert. So commercial, to me, you have that 100-point checklist. Maybe it's like 148 now. Maybe it's expanded a little bit because of inflation, maybe not. But so people who need to do that due diligence, go and check that out if you've got that. And we'll talk about that later. But what are the questions if somebody does go and hire an expert on commercial property? Well, first off, what is the risk in buying without doing your proper due diligence? And how do we know that the person, if we're going to use a commercial buyer's agent, that they know what they're talking about?
Okay, there's two questions there. First one, the due diligence, like you mentioned, it's really comprehensive. I like to explain it kind of like a staircase. So like buying residential property, if you're walking down, there's actually only 3 or 4 things you need to actually worry about in the grand scheme of things to not burn yourself. Like you might not do the best and then you're going to argue, oh, you can do better. But as long as you're not buying like termite ridden house in a flood zone, in a high vacancy rate area or a declining population, you're probably going to be okay. Assuming like you're not buying like a high density oversupplied kind of thing. Like, so there's only kind of 3 to 5 steps you can actually trip up and fall down the stairs. Commercial, it's actually a staircase. So you've got those exact same principles. Then you've got lease review, contract reviews, tenant interviews, competition analysis, road and traffic analysis. You need to talk to town planners, vacancy studies, occupancy study, competition analysis, checking bank guarantees, cash guarantees. There's all these little things. And some of them are actually minor. You can buy the property and it'll sting you a little bit and won't kill you. But other ones, like especially like the vacancy study, that's a big one, and which we touched on before with the questions about the bank and things like that. If you get that wrong, you don't understand how that works, you can burn yourself. Just doing that task is a harder task as well. So like you can go on for residential, go on one of the websites, there's heaps now, SQM, vacancy rates, type in your postcode. It'll give you a pretty good graph of what the vacancy rates look like. That doesn't exist for commercial. So you actually have to find similar properties, look at leasing campaigns, talk to property managers. So there's more work. So to summarize the answer to the question, I'd say it's not the amount of due diligence that's the problem. It's the amount of time that you have to do on the due diligence to actually make sure it's a good property, which most people aren't willing to do. Most people are busy professionals working until 6 p.m. at night, feed the kids and that. They've only got an hour or 2 at night. They don't have a spare. Literally, some of the due diligence we do take 30, 40 hours, on average 20 hours. They just don't have the time to do that on multiple properties.
Yeah.
Which I think leads into your next question was like, how do you trust a buyer's agent?
Is that a trick question?
I've always said never trust a buyer's agent. Like they're not care about your wealth as much as you do. Like you only care about your wealth more than anyone else. The way to kind of, you don't have to trust them, but you need to understand what they're doing so you can cross-check them, because people make mistakes as well. And this is the difference between a good buyer's agent and a bad one. Like a slimy one's just going to send you a bad property and they know it's bad. A bad one just doesn't know that they're buying a bad property. But a good one will hopefully care for the client. And I try to think longer term. I don't just get one deal out of people. I want them to come back and buy number 2, number 3, number 4, and I'll make more money business-wise from that. But the only way you can do it, Jeff, is actually get educated. And you know me, like I've given away a 10-hour course. To 20.
I thought it was 30 hours. I went through it myself, more than 10.
No, 24,000 books, etc. So my thing is just give them all the information so they can make an educated decision. The funny thing is, I actually prefer my educated clients over my non-educated. So with the ones that aren't educated, like you think, oh yeah, I'll just be able to get a quick deal. No, they're going to ask 1,000 questions because they don't understand things. When I send them a 80-page due diligence report and they've done the course, they've done the book, cool. It's an hour conversation of going through it. Yep, done, dusted. The uneducated one, it's a 5-hour conversation over 2 weeks kind of thing.
What are those? What are the 3 to 5 heavy hitting questions? And I've given you a bit of scope there that you need to be asking any buyer's agent, resi or commercial, that you, in your opinion.
Let's go commercial because the resi's been done to death. First one is obviously, it's probably the same answer for the first few anyway as residential. Comparable sales, but getting an understanding of comparable sales. Because if I just present you, say you come to me, Jeff, and you go, oh, I want to buy $1 million property, and I show you let's just say a 200 square meter warehouse in Sydney for $1 million, and go, cool, I've got this property for you. Here's one that sold around the corner for 1.6. Here's one that sold around the other corner for 600K. you're going to be like, well, should I be paying 1.6? Should I be paying 600K? Like, what should I be buying?
Yep.
It's cool.
Ooh.
Then it breaks down into square meter. Whereas for resi, it's a bit easier. It's like 3-bedroom house. But even warehouses in the same complex have different sizes. Some are 200, some are 600, some are 800. So you got to work out the square meter rate. Square meter rate changes based on the size of it as well. So it's even more confusing. Like if you buy a 2,000 square meter warehouse, it has a lower square meter rate than a 200 square meter warehouse. So understanding how to value a commercial is probably the first and foremost when you're getting it. And that's complicated as well. Most of them are done through literally looking at comparable square meter rates. Some are done on like replacement cost method. So I'll even look at things like if you knocked it down and built another one, how much? So that's the first one to get your head around. So understand the price that you're paying. Next one is probably to understand the rents that you're getting. So same thing, you need to be able to understand like, cool, if this one's renting for this, is it a new building versus an old building? Does one have a mezzanine area I forgot about? What percentage of the warehouse is office space? What's the square meter rate for office space in a warehouse, et cetera, et cetera. Is there high ceilings? Is there an overhead crane? So again, just working out square meter rents is more difficult as well. So there's that part of it. And then the third one is probably vacancy. Working out, okay, if I buy a warehouse and it goes vacant, how long is it vacant for? And like I said, you're going to compare the ones with the bigger floor areas, the one with mezzanines, the one with office spaces, the smaller ones. And you basically have to do the grunt work. Go on CoreLogic, talk to property managers, literally follow real commercial and look at leasing campaigns. Like there's more work to do there. So just those three, which for a residential, pardon the buyer's agents for resi, is bloody easy. You can literally kick a button on CoreLogic, on RP data, which is on CoreLogic, auto valuation, bang. There's what it's typically worth. A bit of a thumb suck of, oh yeah, it's slightly newer than the one it's comparing to, etc. Rentals, click of a button, literally CMA for rentals, done. There's your rent. Then for vacancy, go on SQM, click a button, there's your thing, done. You're done in 30 seconds. Commercial, just
I think we just stopped now. You've just told us why we shouldn't be buying commercial. It's too hard.
Exactly right. It's actually way too hard unless you've got the time.
Yeah. There's been, and I'll get to, there's two more sort of, we've covered a couple of these and we'll get to some spreadsheets. And I want to hear how you would, Steve Palise, now that he's knowing what he knows now, how to be financially free. That'll be a quick 5-minute session because he's just going to tell us, well, maybe like commercial, maybe not. I want to see how you can actually think about and answer this one. So apart from the large deposit, we've spoken about buffer and we've spoken about the importance of it. And that's the challenge why you shouldn't be buying commercial. How much do you typically look at, Steve? I don't know if we've probably spoken this a few times, but I think your answer might be a little bit different each time.
Yeah, it depends on the asset class and the asset itself. So comparing it to, say, residential, if you go buy a 1960s build, your buffer for maintenance needs to be way higher than something 5 years old because you've got kitchen renos coming up, bathroom renos, replacement carpet curtains, blah, blah, blah. So like that one, I'm making up a number here based on probably, that might be 10 grand a year, whereas a newer one might only be, say, 5 grand a year. That sort of doesn't apply really on a lot of the commercials that people watching are going to be buying because they're going to buy like a body corporate warehouse or something like that where there's an admin sinking fund doing the maintenance for you. So they're the ones going to like resurface the driveway, paint the building, fix the roof when it needs fixing. But I think the question alludes to if the property goes vacant. So that's probably the biggest one. This is where a vacancy study is really important. So my general rule is whatever I think the vacancy is, typically double it. So if I think it's like a 1 to 6 month vacancy, have 12 months worth of buffer there. Because of what I also realize, and again, this is personal circumstances, in that 12 months, if it's not going my way, I can also save up another buffer. I can tighten my belt and be like, cool, this is happening longer than I thought. Of my, making up numbers here, 150 grand salary, I'm going to save 40 grand to get me through another 6 months, should I need to, kind of thing. So I typically double it. If I'm buying a bank, like the other person's question, cool, 2 years. Like it's going to be something like that. If I'm buying an office space and it's going to be vacancies typically 12 to 24 months, cool, you might have 2 years worth of vacancy. So this, I know this is sounding very negative and I want it to sound negative. Again, it's based on what you're buying with the vacancy and occupancy.
Yeah, I think that's vital because commercial has been sold as a very sexy sort of in the last 2 to 4 years because people have sought out cash flow as rental yields in residential have kind of come down a little bit across the country. Yes, you can still get 8 to 10% yields in very quite regional locations. So I don't know if you want to be buying those areas anyway, like your Kalgoorlies potentially, or so I think it's important that we spell out for people who may not sort of get the education. They just get excited and they say, look, I've got 4 to 6 resi. I'm going to go and buy a commercial now because it's my ticket to freedom. And then off the back of that, I wanted to ask, well, have you seen people when they haven't been in the mindset or haven't been ready to buy commercial from a buffer or all those things? What happens to those people, Steve? Like, what's a real war story you've seen? Have they had to sell? Like, what have they had to do?
Yeah, I want to say something before that. So like one of the kind of ongoing themes I'm having chats with clients is when most people buy a commercial, they look at who the tenant is now. And that's their focus. They're like, oh, this is great. I've got XYZ company, plumbing company as a tenant. They're signed a 5-year lease. Yep. Funnily enough, I actually don't care who the tenant is now because guess what, Jeff? You will get another tenant at some point. Like, unless you're buying a Bunnings, McDonald's, or Hungry Jack's, and even they can still go vacant, but unless you're buying something like that, you are going to get a new tenant. Funnily enough, the better your tenant is, the quicker they're going to move out in certain asset classes. Even if you buy, so certain asset classes have difference. So like an industrial one, better the tenant moves out quicker because they outgrow the space, but vacancy rates start. Suburban retail, they'll stay there for longer, but if the business fails, there'll be a longer vacancy. So I actually more worry about what the property is going to do after that tenant leaves, because that's coming. Whether that comes in 3, 5, 10, 15 years, that's going to show me the demand. And if that demand is good, that's where I get the capital growth and I get the rental increases. So we'll still cross-check everything because we want the next 3 to 5 years of the lease to be smooth sailing. But personally, I'm actually thinking way longer than that. I don't want to hold it for 3 to 5 years. I want this for retirement.
Is that where you can the sort of flexibility of the space? Because if you've got let's just say you've got a gym or whatever reason, but it's kind of in the middle of a medical complex, you kind of think, okay, if that, I don't know why you do that, but possibly you might. But then you're thinking, okay, maybe this is a medical precinct. If it goes vacant, is there the capacity to then repurpose or change that across to a medical? Is that the kind of what you think?
Finally getting through to you. Yeah. So spot on that. But even just simply like most people spend their energy on like who the actual tenant currently is and nowhere near enough energy on what happens when that tenant's not there. And like you just said, who the tenant could be. And that's where the versatility of something like that. Funny you mentioned that. We've actually picked up some stuff like that where you get like, it's like, they're not gyms, but they're like physio gyms. So they've still got like the squat racks and the machines and stuff like that. But they're the ones where it's literally next to like a orthopedic surgeon. And so you're like, cool, if they leave, I might get another specialist.
Yeah, man, the financial freedom, it's going to be hard for me to pick a winner. So keep those coming in, people. But yeah, make my job harder. Make me work for the money that Steve, I mean, I have to work pretty hard for anyway. But no, so let's get on to, because there are some spreadsheets and I want to get to the financial free. Like what would Steve do? WWSD. But so the next point, one of the other points I had, we've spoken about buffer, we've spoken about the due diligence, and we sort of tiptoed around it, but I want to know, I want to sort of understand, I think this might be one of the bigger risks, and I could be wrong here, but the business risk, the thing, do you see that as a reason why people shouldn't be buying commercial? Because they don't understand the business risk. Is that something and is that where due diligence comes in, or you don't see that as much of a risk anyway?
No, so I sort of said in the last kind of statement that like I don't really care who the business is. I shouldn't have said that in regards because it does change on the type of property. So for something like an industrial, it doesn't really matter who the tenant is because it's some concrete at walls and a roller door and a mezz floor and stuff like that. However, you still want to do your due diligence to make sure that the lease that you have is strong and they're going to fulfill that lease. So i.e. got the right bank guarantees. Also just making sure they're not a struggling business. So check the rental ledgers for 2 years and make sure they've paid their rent on time every single time. If you're going into it and you're buying a tenanted property and you look at that and you see that they're 2 months behind on their rent, or they're like always a few days behind, or it's starting to drop down and things like that. Do you really want to get yourself into that mess where you're going to buy a property and straight away you're going to be in a legal battle? It can, funnily enough, still be a really good property. And we've actually had ones where we've picked up bargains where we've actually had that attitude of like, cool, we're going to serve a breach of notice and kick them out and put in a good tenant because we knew what the vacancy rate was. Don't play in that game unless you obviously experience that. However, the reason I shouldn't have said that before is something like a suburban retail, it's crucial because you want them there long term. So you actually want to look at, like, depend on the asset you're buying, like let's just say a hairdresser. Like, what's the competition? What area does that service? So what proportion of residential around that can they do it? What's the competition potentially? Like, if there's a vacant shop, if that becomes a hairdresser, could that kill my business? Would that halve my clientele? And again, you don't want a struggling business. So it's all nice in theory going, oh yeah, we don't want to be bought in a tight vacancy rate. You don't want to have that 6 months of ongoing battle to make sure and keep them afloat, and potentially give rental incentives.
What kind of checks can you do to sort of see that the likelihood of a competitor moving in next door? I mean, I don't know why a hairdresser would move next door to a hairdresser, but maybe it's happened. Like, is there any checks you can do on that?
Happens all the time because someone's just kind of typically not right next door. However, like it might be the
street away or whatever.
Yeah, the closest street away and things like that. However, look at cafes. How many times have you gone to like a thing? There's 3 cafes in a row.
Yeah. There's in my local shopping center, there's like 4 or 5 cafes, and funnily enough, they seem to be able to. So it's then understanding like what the foot traffic is on all those cafes. That's sort of how you're doing due diligence on that.
Yeah,
like,
but I've also seen ones where just a better cafe owner comes in and steals all the business. You'll have a fairly mediocre, like, I don't know, older person, pensioner type kind of cafe with crap coffee and all that. And then like a new age kind of guy, someone who looks like me serving it, charges $8.50 a coffee. And all of a sudden they get busy and they kind of kill that business. So again, that one you need to be prepared because you're like, okay, if I've lost that's probably not going to be a cafe again. That's going to have to be someone else. And that's why if you own a whole shopping center, you want to get the tenancy mix right. Just looking at what's vacant. In addition to that, what's being built as well, because a lot of people neglect that. They might go, oh, sweet, Google Maps, I'm buying a cafe here. There's no cafes within 2 kilometers. Happy days. They didn't look at the 5-story apartment complex around the corner getting built. But guess what they do guess what they do on ground floors sometimes?
Cafes.
Retail,
of course they do.
Retail shops. So so you still got to do all that type of stuff, which you don't have to really do on residential. Like, you don't really care that much. If you're buying a really tightly held area and you get a good house and they build a 4-story apartment tower, it's probably going to add to the area, to be honest, probably not take away too much. You might get a slight little spike in vacancy, but if they're doing that, it's rejuvenating the area because you've got a brand new building there.
Yeah, nice. What we're going to go to now, if anybody has, I want you to pick your favorite spreadsheet, and then we'll tackle that, and then we'll tackle how you build financial freedom or how you do it. It might be residential as well, so stay tuned. But this one's a cracker, and people really were liking this one. What your top pick? This is a question you get asked, and we've done a session on this. So what your top pick for commercial type at 3 price points, under 2 million, 1.5 million, under each of those value points. So under 2 million, under 1.5, and under 800K. I'd rather we go above 2 million, but yeah.
I'll answer with above. That's probably an easy way.
Yep.
Ultimately, it's going to come down to what your goal is of why you're actually buying it, whether you're purely like just cash flow, you want cash flow plus capital growth, or you want to mix, or you want value add. But let's just say vanilla property, set and forget. A pick for over 2 mil is freestanding multi-tenancy or blue chip tenant. So something like my little shopping center for 3.1 mil, where you get 8 tenants. We've bought ones for like 2.2 before, where instead of getting 8 tenants, you might get 6, for instance.
Yeah.
I really like that because you diversify risk. And even I actually think they're fairly recession proof. People are going to argue that, being like, oh yeah, but they're going to be struggling business. They might, but at worst, you're going to probably give a rental concession. Like, people still go get haircuts and go to cafes and go see the GP and the dentist and all that stuff. So that's fairly low risk with that because you've got multiple.
Just on that point, giving a rental concession, giving a free week. Joe talks about this story, and I think I've heard it from other people as well. In Resi, if you're giving like a week's free rent, that potentially could attract a problematic tenant because there's a reason. So how does that sort of play in resi? Like, why is somebody attracted to why wouldn't you just drop the rent?
No, because it's typically an external circumstance. So sometimes they actually have rental concessions built into seasonal locations. So if you've actually got a seasonal business just for the cash flow management, they'll actually have a lower rent in winter than summer, or vice versa if it's obviously a winter location.
Which makes more sense in commercial.
Yeah, but outside of that, like the biggest one is I personally own a cafe. Actually got 2 cafes now. But my first cafe during COVID obviously was not operating anywhere near as much. So I gave them a rental concession based on their reduced profit. So they just had to show their P&L statements each month, and whatever less they did in, like they had 30% less turnover. Sure, they probably did some cashies and stuff on the side, but 30% less. I gave them 30% less run. So that way they were still keeping afloat.
Some rent is better than no rent, because try getting a cafe to start during a pandemic.
Yeah, Joe's sort of right in some regards. He's also heartless for saying that, but like, because some people have genuine reasons, but he's right in regards to typically a residential tenant that is kind of can't afford rent isn't going to come good in the short term. Whereas if it's an external circumstance, what's another one we've had recently? We've actually just bought one in the middle of Canberra, and they're actually doing like a brand new road in front of it. So it's right in the middle. I think it's a tram line, actually. It's a tram line going through.
Northbourne.
Yeah. So they're actually not going to have the foot traffic because it's going to get diverted for a couple months. Yeah. That one you will give a rental concession, probably even free rent. But when it's done, happy days. You've got prime location. It's literally at the train stop off. So they get off and it's there. It's a barbershop. So that's a rental concession I'm talking about. If it's one of the points I want to point out though, one of the things I see commercial investors do is they get a tenant who starts slipping behind on payments, and then they actually give concessions for that. Like, oh yeah, cool, we can do this. It's very rare that businesses come good unless there's a valid reason, like a COVID or a diversion or whatever it is. And most people, the biggest mistake I see is they hold on too long. So this is the other negative for commercial. People are too nice and they help out the businesses for too long, where they're just a band-aid. You're not actually fixing the problem.
Yeah. There you go, Steve. Steve can be heartless.
I didn't actually answer the question. Yeah, so
that's right. I interrupted. So freestanding, for the above 2 mil.
Freestanding multi-tenancy with a good land component, or a blue chip tenant, i.e. like a pet barn, or we've got a super cheap auto and a Repco under contract at the moment. So like stuff like that, really cool. And you can for 2 mil, you can actually get some in. This is where I was bad-mouthing regional areas. Somewhere like a Kalgoorlie, buying a super cheap auto might be actually a good investment, because if the lease is strong, vacancy rate's still going to be there, but you might be working out your numbers based on the lease. If it's got a 10-year lease, you make it almost like you're going to make your profit and it'd be worth nothing at the end of it. If that makes sense, happy days, you might move forward. 1.5 for vanilla property, I would just go a body corporate warehouse on a long lease in a really tightly held area. So I'd buy in kind of like a Brisbane or a Sydney, some areas of Perth as well. If you're not chasing yield, that is. I'm just talking about a good bulletproof property. 800K, I would be going major regional town warehouse freestanding, but be aware of the vacancy risk, or like a Perth warehouse, like again, probably a body corporate one. However, we're buying quite a lot of retail at that price point, because you get a really good bang for buck. You're getting 6.5. You can go in Brisbane. You can buy a retail in Brisbane at 6.5% net with a 3 to 5 year lease. So like that becomes right. Industrial yields at the moment are closer to 5%. So you get an extra 1.5%, which is actually a big proportion. Like we're talking 20-25% more rent. So if it does go vacant, it's got an extra year up its sleeve that the other you didn't have on the industrial.
I'm going to ask you a bit of a selfish one, given that maybe it's not selfish. I think people will be very interested in it as well. Given every buyer's agent or every second buyer's agent is buying in Melbourne, and a lot of investors doing courses, maybe some of ours are buying there as well. But Melbourne, do you see commercial being good value for commercial at the moment? Like, what do you think about? Because you haven't mentioned it yet.
No, we're still ramping up in Melbourne. The price points are typically quite high, though. I don't think we've bought anything in the last month or two, sub-mil. Most of them are in that kind of like 1.2, 1.5, but we're buying around 3 to 5 a month there now. So Some good value. Still, again, like everywhere else, you still got to know what you're doing. Retail, obviously in CBD, is really high risk. If anyone who's walked around Melbourne CBD, you see vacant shops everywhere. So typically industrial properties. We've bought quite a few. There's quite a few new ones getting built as well. So we're buying them some good depreciation benefits, and the vacancy rates are still tight.
Yeah, nice. Guro's asked an interesting one, and then we'll throw to some spreadsheets after our special guest sponsor. But data centers, and it might be the guest. Data centers, could you buy one? What do you think about those? Because they're an interesting one.
You actually command a high yield for them. So like you actually can get some cool ones. We actually bought one in it was a couple of years ago now in Tassie. You can get them. They're a specialized asset for the banks.
So probably
what people don't take.
now.
Yeah. What other people don't take into account is they've got typically high insurance premiums as well, because it's just a huge fire risk. It's literally a room full of heat. So they're high risk there. They're normally sometimes purpose built for that as well. So if the tenant does leave, it's not quite replicable. The equivalent's probably like a lot of people will find like a refrigeration warehouse and be like, oh, this is great. I'm getting a 6.5% yield. It's refrigeration. Yeah, but if they leave, you'd have to rip it all out and kind of go, and you're getting that higher rent because it's that. So you're sort of paying a premium to get that, and it's got a specialized fit out. And again, banks don't like them, sometimes high premiums. I'm not against them, but similar to residential, when you've got the choice of every single property in the world, why would you choose a specialized one? Like, especially at the start.
Why are we buying NDIS and getting that 8% yield, net yield, not yet net yield, 8 or 9% gross yield, when you can go and get a 4 or 5 or 6%, and the capital growth is likely to be better?
It's not even that. It's like equivalent for me would be like for Resi. Why would you buy in a flood zone when you could buy like 5 streets over and not be in the flood zone? And they go, oh yeah, but I'm getting a better price, Jeff. Yeah, cool. You're taking
or on the main road. It's like, I can get a 100K discount, but at the same time, if you ever sell that asset, when you sell it, you're selling it for the same discount. So are you actually making any money? Maybe not. Probably.
So it's the same thing there. Like I always buy with versatility in mind, because that's what's going to get me through the next 30 years.
Because somebody called you a flexible giraffe, or something. I think Greg called you that. So that was good on you. So Greg. Steve, get your spreadsheet ready, because we're going to throw to our sponsor. He may have a beard. He may be on this live stream, and it's not me. So we'll do that, and then we'll go to your favorite spreadsheet. So you better get up quick, Steve, because this one's a quick one. Okay. Stay tuned.
I'm going to make a last minute change. I'm going to change
Oh, Jeff, I wish there was 3 investing books that covered everything property.
Oh, Joe, there is. Steve has 3 books now.
That I do, guys. I've got 3 books now. You probably don't even have to follow this group anymore. Just kidding. You want to keep seeing and hearing from me, of course, so stay involved. But in all seriousness, if you want to get the full picture of investing, residential, commercial, and development, these 3 books have you covered for the fundamentals. For OzProp members, here's the best part. I'm giving these books to you for free. Just cover the postage and I'll send them right to your door. Go to paliseproperty.com or click the link below and get your copies today. You can also get all my spreadsheets, checklists, and resources free on my website. Happy reading, gang.
There we go. He's back. You almost need the level up property ad too, which is like 3 minutes.
I forgot I did that ad.
Yeah, it's gold. It's so quick as well. It's efficient. Everybody's saying I should have dropped the sneaky link, but no. Anyway, so we are going to be giving away we're going to give away 2 or 3. I'll reveal it now. So sessions with Steve. So this is literally getting access to the man, which he's very hard to book in. He values his time, so he's giving me permission to give that away. So I'll pick some winners. So if you want to let us know why you want to why you want financial freedom, and we'll talk about it at the end as well. But if you want to drop that comment, I will pick a couple of winners. And if you're watching after, drop it in the comments as well. So Steve, your favorite spreadsheet, let us know.
All right. I'm going to do a bit of self-promotion here just because of the amount of time we actually have to spend on this.
Okay.
Let me just go to my entire screen. Let me share my screen.
Amount of time.
Yeah, I'm going to show you. So, not sure if you go to paliseproperty.com, I've actually done a commercial property stamp duty calculator. There's none, literally none that you can actually get this just is involved in this. So like I've went to every single online one I can find and then stripped it back to bare bones and actually went to the government websites and calculated what you need, because it actually changes based on like whether you're a foreign purchaser or like some states do like the unimproved land value and things like that. And if what data
Could you
was
make your screen a bit bigger, man?
I can, but
It's just yeah.
that
there
right?
you go. That's better. Amazing.
Yeah, so like every state has a different one because it depends on when you purchase it. Then there's like foreign investor, ACT. Let's get the country. Vic, unimproved Vic does offer unimproved land value. There's so much kind of complexity behind it. So if you're looking to calculate, because it does change, some people get quite shocked because on these things I always say, oh yeah, it's 3.5%. No, it's sometimes like 5%, especially for a high-end one, and it can actually add up quite quickly. So feel free, you can even download it, like I said, to give everything away for free. But have a bit of a play and just double check your stamp duty, because I've seen quite a lot of people get stung with that. They kind of buy a property and then they get to unconditional and then all of a sudden they get stuck with a 50 grand stamp duty bill. So that's cool little calculator. Like I said, literally spent months working on this. However, the spreadsheet I'm going to introduce. I'm going to zoom in.
Commercial property return on investment. Interesting.
Yeah, it's an oldie but a goodie. So I wasn't going to do this one. I was actually going to do like a lease stock or like a growth one or a pay down one. But because we were talking about like shares and comparable shares, let's just run some numbers, Jeff. So let's just say 1 point. What do you want? 1 point purchase price. Let's just go.
Let's say 1.2 million. I like 1.2 million. Maybe I should be difficult and say 1.25 million.
Yeah, 1.2 mil. All right.
Yep.
So this is where the deposit can change things. Obviously, we can do change depreciation and stuff, but let's just keep it like similar to residential. You might get $3,000. We'll change it in a sec. But basically, this is one of the negatives we were talking about before. Is you've got a 360 grand deposit, big chunk of change. You can go out and buy a house for 1.2 mil, probably with 150. Loan amount 840. Stamp duty. This is literally just 3.4%. So I need to actually update this with my new spreadsheet to kind of do lookup tables. Additional purchasing costs, that's probably more like $5,000 with valuation, stamp duty, legals. If you go full down the rabbit hole, legals and conveyancing with lease reviews and stuff like that, that can actually be just 5 to 7 grand conveyancing alone. But let's just keep it 5 grand. So you got $400,000 to get a 1.2 mil property. Like it's a big chunk of change. And this is the negative. And this is why I decided to choose this one. That is a big negative. However,
so Steve, people probably want access to this. You have to put your email in. So you can't just, is that because I have to email it to people? Is it too hard to show on a screen?
No. So are you talking about you can download it? So just go to my website, it's in the resource section and download it, and they can play with all the numbers and the formulas as much as one. There's no secrets here. Like property is easy. It's just simple mathematics. So you can come use whatever I've got.
Tell us more, Steve. Sorry.
Is it small?
No, tell us more.
I'll tell us more. Okay. All right. So loan interest rate, let's go 6.5%. So quite high. Net rent, it's going to be depends on what yield we get. So 6%. Let's just go $70,000. That's 5.83. So that's a pretty typical kind of like yield. Like most of the stuff we buy is 5 to 6.5%. And we can change this number as well, just to show you kind of thing. So this is what someone's question was before. And they actually made a good point. Like, why am I buying commercial? I'm only getting like a neutrally geared property because, well, this one's actually not too bad. It's $18,000 a year because you're using cash. A lot of people behind the scenes are going, oh, I'm pulling this 405 grand from equity. So it's actually not a 70% LVR. It's actually 100% LVR. But let's just pretend the cash because it keeps it simple. Your cash on cash return is actually only 4.53. So this is the negative. What I said before, shares are way better. Like you can get 8 to 12, 15% returns.
Not financial advice, people. I should put the disclaimer up.
I'm happy to say that. You can get way better cash on cash returns from unleveraged money in other firms, other stocks than property. But
you may.
But this is where this is going to come in. So even though that's not too bad, 1.2 mil property, 18 grand a year cash flow. You go buy the same thing in residential, it's probably 40 grand, 50 grand negative. So all of a sudden we're 70 grand-ish better off buying this property in regards to holding the actual property. However, this is why I always say don't just chase yield. If we get 5% capital growth as well, we now get a 20% return. And that's not including rental increases, which actually add on to that as well. And I've got another spreadsheet where we can actually project the rental increases and how that actually changes that. And it's actually really powerful, Jeff. If you do 3% on 3% on 3% on 3%, this starts exponentially growing. It goes to like 20%, then it goes to 23, then it goes to 25, then it goes to 29. And that exponentially gives you a way better return. Hence, and the same thing happens obviously with capital growth, like that compounds as well. If you do 5% on 5% on 5%, and this is why we talk about like the 7-11 rule. Like if you get 7% growth, in 11 years, the property's double in value. But that is actually
Rule 72.
So this is actually quite a powerful thing because we can actually get 5% and make 19%. Whereas with residential, if it's negatively geared and you're getting 5% capital growth, you're actually not getting really like, and the ROI is basically the growth rate. Like it's actually not that strong. And this is sort of the power of commercial. And then the funny thing is when you actually put more money in, your ROI actually goes down, which shocks people. In most people's brain, they think the other way. They go, oh, if I put bigger deposit in, I'll actually get a better return on investment.
Well, because cash on cash.
They will for the cash flow. The cash flow goes up because there's less debt on the property. But because you've sacrificed leverage, which is the whole game of property, your actual ROI actually goes down. So arguably, you can actually get a better ROI when you combine these two of actually having a bigger deposit. Doesn't look as attractive necessarily in the first year, but if you start projecting it over, say, 5 years, leveraging a money you make a way more long term. However, you've got more risk as well. Like this property, like it's 34 grand a year. If you lose that, like the rent's 70 grand. If you don't have a tenant on 1.2 mil, it's effectively 70 grand a year you've lost that you now have to make up out of pocket or whatever the interest on the loan is if you want to work out that as well. So that's the negative of commercial is you don't get the rent. You've got to hold the mortgage. If the ROI, the cash on cash is not as strong unless you actually don't leverage up as much. But however, if you do leverage up and you do get it right, happy days, you start getting 20%. But if you go like say 90%, you're down at 11%, which is still not bad for a commercial. I still think it's actually better than residential. But this is a cool little spreadsheet because it takes away the argument of cash flow versus capital growth. Cool. Let's treat this like we're comparing it with the share market and look at cash on cash return. And we can look at that on cash, and then we can do capital growth. Then we can combine it. So that's the cool power of kind of commercial property and just property in general, if I'm honest.
Yeah, there you go. I think okay. So mate, we better get back to us, I suppose.
Let me just stop sharing.
Yeah, that's all right. It's all good.
Am I back?
If I worked out how this.
There we go.
We're back. We are back. So, Steve, what I wanted to know, and I've said to people, start dropping their questions and comments and all that jazz. But I wanted to know, Steve, if you were to, if I could work this out, I don't know, I had it fine before. I wanted to know financial freedom. How would you actually get to being financially free? Like, what are the steps you would, knowing what you know now? Because that's the question on a lot of people's lips. Like, how do they sort of do it in a higher? So obviously you've got your knowledge, but you don't have property prices that are sort of 200,000 to 300,000 in Sydney or 400,000 in Blacktown area when you were buying. So you bought your first in Blacktown for what? Probably 350, was it?
No, 230.
230. Oh, geez. Okay, that must have been like That must have been bloody Layla Park or something, was it?
No, it was in Blacktown. It was just a shitty little housing commission property.
Yeah. Oh, well, Layla Park's even. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have been because you might still own the property, but no, because like Layla Park is one of some actual Blacktown, but because I know that area quite well because I've got relatives that live off that road. But so what would you do, Steve?
I actually went unconditional on that selling of that property today. So
wow,
and I sold it for 550. So
550.
like, yeah.
Okay.
So you can still do all right. So
in Blacktown. So
Black-
you're telling me how big was the land on that property? Like,
no, it's a townhouse, that one.
okay, I see. Yeah, I was going to say selling a house in Blacktown area for
If it's a house, it's like 850.
at least 850. Yeah,
Yep.
nice. Okay. So what would you do though today if you had to? We'd probably wouldn't buy a commercial, I imagine. Most people.
I probably would have started earlier with commercial, if I'm honest.
Okay.
But this is probably the answer that most people aren't going to like.
Okay.
Increase your income earlier.
Oh no, not that one. Oh, that chestnut.
It sounds stupid, but if you can double your income, you can buy twice as many properties, and it takes away all the grunt work that you need to do with the other stuff. Like I'm like you guys, like you've been through the trenches as well. I grafted, like my first 5 properties, I was renovating them myself. I was looking every night. I could have just got rid of all that if I focused on increasing my income an extra 50 grand a year. That could have let me probably buy another property every single year. And I could have just paid market rate, set and forget. And I'd actually be in a better position now. And that's sometimes, and people always get angry when I post this on social media, and I've seen like Jack Henderson's and all that. They kind of rile people's feathers. I'm not telling you have to do it. I'm just saying if you want to get actually a bigger portfolio, that is the fastest way to do it. If you increase your salary by 50%, you're probably going to have double, if not triple, the portfolio in 20 years, because the power of compounding, just getting that extra property early on, is going to kind of pay dividends. And you can do that through, and I know lots of people in this group do this, they do side hustles and they do the renos and they're trying to do it that way. But if you can actually just increase your income early on, that will pay way more dividends than anything. To answer your question, probably should have started buying commercial when I was hitting my servicing earlier. Like everyone, I hit my servicing limit probably 4 or 5 times through the last 12 years. And every time I just sat on my hands being like, oh, damn it, now I got to wait for the rents to go up or my income to go up. In hindsight, I should have been more mindful of that and got into commercial where that doesn't matter, because I could have bought commercial even though I had no servicing. But again, you don't know what you don't know. Like 7 years ago, I thought commercial was really risky. You shouldn't buy it. There was big deposits. They don't have capital growth like everyone else. So like you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Man, this so far has been a great question, everybody. Great question, great session. Great questions being asked this session from myself, but mostly the audience. So if people have questions, please let us know. They've been super smart questions so far, but I've got a couple from Serena. She's a Chief Question Officer, CQO, over there in WA. I just invented a role there, but she wanted to know if higher yields are risky. Why do I don't know if I 100% agree with this question, but let's unpack it anyway.
You can't disagree with a question, Jeff. You can only disagree with an answer.
Okay, fair enough. The premise of the question, maybe. Can I disagree? No, yeah. Why do sophisticated investors keep chasing them in commercial? Do sophisticated investors chase high yields? So, Steve.
No, so it depends. It depends on the purpose of buying. So you want to chase a high yield, of course, the same as you want to chase a high yield in resi without sacrificing the capital growth. And that's the game, and that's probably the argument that I have with some investors that go out and buy in like mining towns and things like that. I argue, and this is an argument, I can't prove it. This is the whole thing with property, because time's going to dictate who's right and who's wrong. But in the last 5 years, I've been right, so hopefully it's the next 5 years I'm right. If I've got a property in, I don't know about area, but like let's say Mount Isa, and another investor or buyer's agent's buying in Mount Isa, and they get a 7% net return, and they go, oh, happy days, I've got a 7%, Steve. You're only buying in 6% in Brisbane. I know with my Brisbane property, because of the tight vacancy rates, vacancies are literally 1 to 3 months in most areas we buy. Vacancy rates in Mount Isa are typically 1 to 3 years. So just having that time of vacancy means you're not going to get rental increases, because there's so many vacant properties. There's no pressure for rental increases. My Brisbane one, because it's got tight vacancies, people competing, similar to residential, rents go up, I'm going to get rental increases. So with the cap rate staying the same, that gives me capital growth. So I'm getting rental increases, which is increasing my yield. I'm getting capital growth. And then my cash flow and return on investment is actually better because I don't have the long periods of vacancy. So my ROI is actually better. Their cash flow is better, at least for the next few years. Whereas everything I've bought in, say, Brisbane and Perth the last 5 years, we buy them at 6%. They're now 8.5%. Whereas the ones in the mining towns are still 7% because I haven't had the capital up. So the rental increases. So it kind of depends on how you look at it. A side topic to that question is, I'm not sure if you meant sophisticated or high net worth. High net worth, you can still buy low. Sophisticated, you can be smart and still not have money. But by letter of the law, sophisticated investor is someone who earns more than 200K a year. I think actually increased last year to 250 grand.
I think it's probably free. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
250
it's or over 2.5 million worth of assets.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So like that's the technical term, but most people don't actually know that when they say sophisticated. However, a high net worth one has different power. Like they can buy the big blue chip tenants in those areas and still get the yields. They can also do kind of more creative ways to actually get value because they could go buy a vacant property in one of those high risk regions, cop the year or two, get a brand new tenant in and get the uplift because of the tenant. And we see one of our clients does that actually all the time. They got a relationship with Supercheap. They buy a warehouse they know is perfect for Supercheap. They take it to them being like, do you want to move in here? They get them in, bang, like double the value.
Do they do that before they commit to buying the property, or they're that confident that they know it's going to happen?
They normally do an option on it, so they'll pay 100 grand and get 12 months, and they gamble the 100 grand typically. One of the other guys I'm thinking of, he actually does just buy it and do it, but most of the ones doing that just do an option, which is a big risk. Going, okay, I'm going to give you 100 grand in 12 months' time. If I don't settle on this property, you keep the 100 grand. Like, cool, happy days.
Depends, I suppose, on like 100 grand. That could be, if that's 2% of somebody's net worth. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of risk, but it's kind of like somebody like with a 5 million net worth, and that to them is like, I mean, I suppose it's still not, but like somebody with 500K net worth, that's like 20% of their. So it all comes down to.
So they play in a different realm to kind of most. But again, I don't want to badmouth anyone in the group, but like there's people in the group that are residential yield chasers, and like they'll call themselves sophisticated and cash is king and blah 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 blah. I don't care about cash. Like your ROI needs to be strong. That's the number you care about.
Exactly. That was an interesting question. That when I didn't expect it to go that way. I didn't expect it to have such a long. I learn things every time when these questions get asked. One thing somebody asked here, because we know that commercial may be able to grow. I'm not going to admit defeat yet. But how to find capital growth on a commercial property? And I suppose you could attack this in a couple of ways, because you can't just jump on realestate.com or CoreLogic or Corality, I don't know what they've renamed themselves, so whatever they call themselves these days, and look at, okay, what has this done in the last year? Or can you do that in commercial? Does real commercial have that, Steve? And then how do you actually...
Well, you can still, similar on CoreLogic, you can still see previous sales. So you can go find like the 5 warehouses that sold this year and then compare it to what it was in the past.
But it's manual though. I want the chart that just shows me I want the easy route.
That'll come. There's a lot of those big companies, and I'm seeing stuff behind closed doors. That's going to be released in the next few years, and I'm all for that. As soon as that happens, commercial is going to explode because every second armchair investor is going to get involved now. Whereas at the moment, I'm still running a business because people aren't willing to do the grunt work. So that'll change the game completely. But yeah, same thing. Go on CoreLogic. Find sales, recent sales, historical sales. You can still sort of work it out anyway, because even if the property hasn't sold, you can look at what it sold for in the past and look at and value it now. It doesn't have to have sold. You can just go, I know it's a 6% cap rate and it's worth 1 mil. Cool. I looked 10 years ago, it was sold for 460 grand. Sweet. It's doubled in value in the last 10 years. Like that, you can still do that. But again, more legwork, and most armchair investors don't have CoreLogic as well.
Yeah. And the other part of this, I'm going to take a bit of poetic license. So somebody says, like, how do you actually find, I mean, you can manufacture capital growth on like resi, you can do it in commercial as well. You can do the mez kind of conversion. I think you made, was it 800,000 in a weekend? That was a nice little clickbait title there. But is there ways you can sort of start to say, yes, is it purely based on the cap rate? Is that the way you can say, okay, there's going to be capital growth because rents are going to increase. Is there a way to become that sophisticated in looking at capital growth and commercial? Or not
No,
quite?
so the cap rate has nothing to do with capital growth. Even though it's capitalization rate, it's just what comparing apples and apples, what the property's worth. The argument most people are going to say is, and they say the same thing residential, does a lower yield mean more capital growth than a higher yield? And you can always argue both ways. It's like saying, did Mossman grow more than Blacktown? I bet you on paper, Blacktown grew percentage more than Mossman.
Yeah.
Mossman probably in the last 10 years grew 70%. Blacktown probably grew 200%. So sorry, 100%. So it's not necessarily the case, but for me, going those really high yields normally brings on risk. And that's why there's not many investors willing to buy. If there's not that many investors willing to buy, how are you going to get capital growth? But you kind of alluded to one of the points that's worth touching on. The rental increases can actually give you, it's not foolproof, but a pretty confidence capital growth formula. So if you've got something and it's got 3% rental increases, you can kind of safely go, over the next 3 years, I'm going to have 3% on 3% on 3%. Where that falls over is, yes, it looks great in theory, but if there are recessions or some other properties, the rents start dropping the other way, even though the lease says, oh, you're going to get 3%, 3%, 3%, if you get to the end and the other rents have dropped by 10%, yours is going to drop at the end of the lease term. They're going to negotiate it down. So it's not a foolproof way, but it's at least an indicator. The better one's probably just go off inflation. That's probably the safer one to work off.
Yeah, nice. I know we've asked this a little bit, and I'm going to ask a spicy question about your worst property investment or the worst commercial you've seen. At what point do you swap from resi to commercial in this environment and time? And maybe that's the twist on the question from Matty Brand, because I'm sure Matty Brand's seen a session or two with Steve. But yeah, what do you think about that? Has that changed from 3 to 5 years ago? Given that resi prices, it's harder to get a free 400 to 600K resi these days. Has that changed, Steve?
Yeah, so it's changed, but probably not for what you're talking about with prices. For me, it's changed due to lending. Lending's been the biggest one, where most keen investors want to keep buying, and they've just been handcuffed by high interest rates and servicing. Whereas
what about unlimited borrowing capacity in trust, though, Steve? You've heard about this, haven't you?
Yeah, but again, for commercial, but that's why they went to commercial, because commercial is obviously easier to do that. That's been the biggest kind of driver into commercial. I actually think it's going to probably start going back the other way, maybe, if interest rates actually come down and like say they do actually come down and people get their servicing back, they're going to go back to resi. So they're going to step away from commercial and they're going to go to progressive portfolio that way. But again, I don't talk or worry about what interest rates are doing, because I'm not buying a property for this moment in time. I'm buying it for 10 years time. I have no idea what Trump's doing in 10 years time. I'm just like, cool. I want the property to be in more demand in 10 years than it is now. I don't care what happens to prices. More demand means I'm in a better position than not buying.
Yeah. Nice. Well answered, Steve. So if I see any more burning questions, I will get to them, but I want to know, what is the worst commercial investment you've seen? Like I've gave you an hour to think about this. So hopefully not purchased by Palise property, but
no, I'll talk about the ones we crashed, because they're the important ones as well. We bought in Sunshine Coast. We went on a contract on a whole shopping center that had a petrol station or Woolworths. Got it for a cracking yield. Everything looked fantastic. And then just because we've literally got in our team, we've got a solicitor, or an ex property solicitor who works in the team. She did. Nita. So she did some digging on the petrol station, because like the biggest thing with petrol stations is land contamination. And we did the investigations, looked at how old the tank was, do that. And then the first report we got back was actually clear. It said no land contamination. We're like, oh, that's good. And then she, with the know-how, was like, well, no, the tanks are more than 20 years old and haven't been replaced. That's a big issue. Then we spoke to an insurer about that, and they're like, well, we're not going to insure it because it's more than 20 years old. And then when we investigated, we actually told our client, we're like, no, we need to pay for it. And we actually copped it. We're like, we're gonna pay for this because we want to be able to sleep at night. We actually did a soil investigation and found it was contaminated. The estimated cost, the property was, I think, 7 mil. The estimated cost was about 2 mil to fix it. So it looked fantastic on paper. We're like, this is the best thing ever. We're getting a Woolworths, and like, I think it was 22 shops or something like that. We're like, this is awesome. That yield just would have been completely eroded by trying to fix that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're talking probably several hundred thousands at least. Mate. Would it go into the millions to do fix something like that?
It was $2 million to fix it.
Wow.
2
Okay.
million.
Gee. I was thinking maybe like high hundreds of thousands, but gee, 2 million. Yeah. Because that just, yeah. Well, good pick up there. So somebody has asked, Tirith has said, and I think I know the answer to this, and maybe it's a little bit self-serving, but I have a portfolio in Resi. I have always done it myself. I find commercials altogether a different game. It definitely is. If you've been watching, we uncovered the reasons why buying commercial is wrong for people. How can I upskill in this space before thinking if commercial is in my interest or not? What's the best? Oh, there's the book. What about the course, though, Steve? I think the course.
Yeah.
I'm more visual kind of learner. I don't.
Yeah,
write a
no,
book.
some people like books. So Turth, go on paliseproperty.com, get my book for free. So there's 350 pages on that. Jeff also mentioned that I've got a 10-hour course. So it's called the Commercial Property Institute. That's 10 hours of everything you need to know, walkthroughs, all that type of stuff. Or just go on like my YouTube channel as well. I think I've got like close to 1,000 hours worth of stuff now on there. But just get educated. But the two is one, the book, the course. If you don't want to sit at a computer and you don't want to read a book, I've also summarized the book on my podcast, Commercial Property Investing Explained. And the first 10 episodes is literally me and Andrew being the host, going through the book chapter by chapter, talking about each relevant section. So there's 3 options. You got the reading, you got the listening, you got the video, all the ways to kind of learn. So get educated, as we kind of said the takeaway before, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody asked James, and I think this is probably the last one, guys. So unless you ask an absolute banging question, this will be the last one for the night. So he said, why is it easier to get a commercial loan? Less risk to the bank. Is it easy to get a commercial loan? I don't know. I always thought Resi is very kind of stock standard. Like commercial, you need to, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
He's not talking in complexity of bank documents. He's talking in regards to servicing. Why is it easier? So
okay.
I sort of touched on it before. So when you're buying a residential and you're buying a commercial property and it's a full doc loan, you've got 3 times the rent with the commercial property. So when banks are checking your servicing, you've got more capacity to service that loan. So hence it's easier, not easier in regards to the bank documents and tax returns and all that type of stuff. Then if you're out of servicing, but you've got enough to pull out, say 30-40% of equity, you can then put that into a lease doc loan, which services itself. Hence you can keep going with commercial when you can't with residential.
Well, yeah, I like, there are some tricks, but yeah, it does get complicated as well. So I do agree with you.
The takeaway is make sure if you are considering commercial, talk to a commercial savvy broker. Like
100%.
Our pet peeve at Palise Property is literally whenever we see a broker we don't know or the Resi broker, we're like, this is just going to be an absolute disaster. And it is. Yeah. They don't know how to book valuations correctly. They don't do things on time. They don't know how to assess a lease. They buy under the wrong lender because they just go like full doc instead of lease doc, or they don't even have like commercial only lenders on their panel, like Think Tank and stuff like that. So, and there's Granite Home Lends, like there's quite a few, like it just turns into a disaster. So make sure you got someone with commercial runs on the board.
It's a different beast completely. So, look, Steve, this has been an amazing session, everybody. If you've gotten value from this, look, we're getting more reviews on Spotify. So give us a rating on that as to why you shouldn't buy commercial. I think we've uncovered so many topics that I've learned probably 2 or 3 things in this session. And I've even had Steve acknowledge that I'm finally picking it up. So it's been a groundbreaking session. So, but go and give us a 5-star on Spotify, because that gives us, we're passionate about getting people educated. So jump on there, give us a 5-star and get it out to more people. So Steve, on that note, mate, before you go off on another holiday, because it sounds like you are already going away. You said that at the start, you probably got your next 4 holidays planned. So good on you. I want to know, what is the best way that people can get more of Steve in their lives, as Joe says?
I actually want to mention one of the cool things I'm actually doing this weekend, Jeff. I'm actually going in like a jet fighter plane, which should be good fun. Oh,
okay. Are you flying that, or is something? Yeah,
I don't think so. I don't imagine they've got the control at the back. Actually, I don't know. If I get shot in a war, I imagine the person at the back's got to be able to steer. Yeah, I'll let you know next session. But I'm doing that, so hopefully I pass out and get some funny footage for that.
Wow. What's driving that? Has somebody sort of dared you to do it, or like why
No,
did you?
just something I've always wanted to do. So paid the $1,800 to do it.
Is Mike Mort like the one driving that for you, or he's not driving?
I think he does the passenger planes.
Yeah, no, I know he does.
But
awesome.
get a hold of me. Like most people in the group know, just type in Steve Palise or Palise Property on Google. Yeah, you go. Like YouTube, socials, either Steve Palise Property. I'll come up. I'm pretty prevalent on there.
Yeah, he's in some Guardian articles recently. So yeah, keep an eye on those. He's not in a budgie smuggler, thankfully. Not that I could remember. But no, the pundits, the plaudits are coming in. Great session. Thanks, Jeff and Steve. Thanks, boys and everyone. And Greg, great. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And as we sort of say, maybe let's not go and buy a commercial, let's not go buy a commercial property, but maybe let's do it. Thanks, Steve.
Let's go buy some stocks and shares, everyone.
Maybe crypto, maybe don't. Not financial advice. See you next week, team.
See you guys.